Thank you so much, Dr. Bell, for being here with us today. I Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in Embrace the Journey.
Well, I've been an emergency physician for over 20 years, was married, a beautiful family, and then went through a divorce that was very difficult, and just wasn't happy in my job, and I was looking for answers. So I just started walking in the woods for answers. And the four questions I had were, who am I? Of course, we
You
always
mean
ask.
like literally walking in the woods, like taking walks?
Yeah,
Okay.
going into nature, and just
So,
observing nature. And the other three questions are, of course, where did I come from? Why am I here? And then where am I going? Kind of questions we all face at some point in our life.
right.
And I started to study the mind. And I'm not sure how that came about, but just started to see mathematical patterns in nature. Started studying the mathematical equations that make up these patterns, and then just started studying the mind, and was convinced that that's where everything began and ended. And that was where the answers for me were. So for the last 10 years, I've been searching for a way to find answers. And I've stumbled upon just that mathematics is the basis of not only the universe, but also who we are and how our mind works. And create a program that could help anybody overcome any type of mental suffering based on these mathematics and things that I've observed.
Comparative to, and we'll get into your program, but could this be comparative to like quantum physics and some of the research being done in that area?
Yeah, I studied quantum physics quite a lot. And just because, again, physics and mathematics are the basis of everything. And try to understand how that related to human behavior and emotion and thought, and kind of the relationship between all of that. And that helped me a lot, just personally, but also just to understand what are some of the answers for mental suffering.
Right. So let's go back many years to when you decided to go to medical school. What was your why there? And kind of take me a little bit on that journey.
Well, for me, I think it was coming out of a broken home. I was looking for ways to be important. And for me, to become a doctor was a way to become important.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I realized through this journey that everything that I've done was to make me feel good from the outside in. Job as a doctor,
Mhm.
getting married, even having children. And I asked myself, well, why did I get married? For me, wasn't for her. Why did I have children? For me, not for them. They weren't born yet. So all these things that I searched for from the outside, and then it all fell apart. And I was like, well, that can't be the answer. And realized that we search things in people, things, and experiences on the outside to make us happy, but it's not lasting.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being authentically vulnerable. I mean, that is a hard place to be. And, just admitting that you made some of these choices to kind of get that external validation for lacking. And I think many people make those kinds of decisions, but they don't have the insight into kind of why they're doing that. And so I commend you for your vulnerability of being
Oh, thanks.
sharing that journey and that realization.
Yeah, I've always asked why since I was a little kid, and then to turn that in on myself and to be real with myself. A lot of greats in the past have said know yourself, and you can only do that by being honest with yourself of who you are and why you do the things that you do. And that's what I'm trying to become even better at, is to be real and vulnerable with that.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Like, there's this movement of self-love, and it almost is kind of confusing because it looks like indulgence, right? We're telling people self-love, but really you have to know yourself uh, to be able to like yourself and then love yourself. Like it's growth that happens over time. And maybe if we started kind of teaching children and young adults how to know themselves, we could maybe have that insight a little earlier instead of waiting until we have a crisis.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not being just kind of rosy and all sweet and positive with yourself. You have to be as real and honest with yourself as you would be with anybody else, and say, look, you've been an idiot here, or you've made this. I went to drinking after my divorce just to get to sleep. I was working nights and things, and did some idiot things that made my suffering even worse. I mean, I brought all this on by myself, but then I kept pushing myself to study, well, where did this all come from? Why did I make these choices? Why did I have a need to become a doctor? And we'll get into some of that later, but by making these choices, there was a foundation as to why I did those. And that, for me, in my study, has come from childhood, that is the source of all of our foundation, our operating system for life.
Right, right, absolutely. And as you were going through this trial, and I had my own worry, I've lost 3 children over the course of 17 years. The one most recently was in 2021, which means I have no more biological children. And I went through a very deep, and I've been doing self-development work for over 20 years, and I still got to a very deep, dark place of who am I? And again, those external validations, I've always, went for the next degree and the next success and start a business. And when life takes those things, or what's most important to you, which was my children, you're like, who am I? Am I even a mother? And
right.
So I understand that place, and I think many people get to that place at one point in their life. And so I teach about like resilience and mental strength and how to think through your problems, organize them so that you can make choices in line with what you want, which is a solid cognitive behavioral. We have a couple questions that go into kind of psychoanalytical. When did this start? In your childhood, when did you feel this way? But the reality of current counseling is we don't have time to do psychoanalytical, right? There's just the time that method takes is too long. So I'm very excited to kind of hear how you kind of mainstream this or made it where it's more accessible to people. So share with us kind of that intimate journey of finding your method.
Well, in asking why and seeing mathematics as the basis of our minds, I studied mammals, animals, and started to come up with the idea that emotion was really the foundation of our thought life. And for me, that was confirmed with a couple experts. There's an expert named Mark Solms, who's a psychotherapist, neuroscientist in South Africa. He's the head of consciousness and emotion. And another guy named Jaak Pansep, who for 35 years studied the emotion systems in mammals that are common to all mammals. There's 7. And he mapped out every chemical and every pathway that start in the brainstem. And I started to put this program together and started delivering this. And it was so effective because when I had people create and retrain their emotion systems, their thought patterns became much better. And then I started to think about, well, in evolution, your brainstem comes before your cortex. And let's say take cognitive behavior therapy. That is how to not have negative thinking, use thoughts to kind of outsmart your thoughts. But what came first? the 7 emotion systems in your brainstem. So every mammal has them, even without a big cortex. So your thought life later in life, your anxiety and depression, I found, comes from these 7 emotion systems. And if they're corrupted, that's your operating system for life. That's your subconscious mind. And so,
can you tell us what those 7 are?
yeah, the first one, and the thing that drives mammals the most and drives us, is seeking. And for mammals, it's food, shelter, whatever they want to survive. And since we don't have as much of a survival need, we then take that to family, job, importance, whatever, money, things. So seeking is number 1. And these first 4 are common to amphibians and mammals. Number 2 is lust. Number 3 is physical fear. Number 4 is anger. So if somebody gets in the way of our seeking, then we're going to get upset. And you see that, in the animal kingdom. So these next 3 are only specific to mammals, and that's care. Mammals take their young and care for them, teach them. Number 2 is play. All mammals play, and all mammals laugh. Even rats laugh, but they laugh. This guy, Yak Pansep, found that they laugh at a frequency that we can't hear. So he would tickle rats and found out that they laugh. And so playing with siblings and other children are important to learn social skills. And then the third, the most important thing, is separation anxiety. And that is the basis, I think, of most of our anxiety and depression, is the fear of being separated that starts in childhood, every divorce, neglect, abuse, just not feeling good enough, comparing yourself to other people. And then you go through life that's reinforced with relationships, peers, girlfriends, jobs you don't go for, because you have 4 fears of separation, rejection, failure, and death. And it's fear, to me, that is the root of all this corrupted thinking later in life. And that fear is programmed in childhood by age 7.
Yeah. Yeah. And all the research says that by age 7, stimulates foundation. So tell us about, in your story, how these 7 emotions kind of played out and allowed you to, work past and would soon heal from depressive symptoms.
Well, for me, I had to go back, and I think it starts with who I am, and that I am what I was programmed to be. And so I was programmed through emotion. And I think back to the things in childhood that made me want to become a doctor, be an awesome father, get married as a source of my happiness. And they're programmed by what was emotional, what was familiar, and what was repetitive. And all those 3 things are mathematics. Emotion is a certain ratio of neurotransmitters. Familiar patterns, not what's right and wrong, but what is familiar. And that's why we go on to make choices that are unhealthy later in life, because we're thinking of what's familiar and what we know. And that's more powerful than what we can discern in right and wrong, which goes back to cognitive behavioral therapies, because in that therapy, you're trying to fix this big operating system that's based on emotion familiarity with right and wrong thinking, which is very weak compared to this robot, like a computer that you've been programmed. That emotion, though, was put there by other people. And you got their fears. We got our parents' fears. We got our siblings' fears, education, media, whatever. It's fear, fear, fear. Those emotions were programmed for you. And so what I realize is the only fix is not to try to outsmart those strong emotions, is to reprogram those emotions. So what I've come to do over the last 10 years is find a way that's the most effective way to reprogram those emotions to created emotions, not reactive emotions.
Right. So I'd like to touch base a little bit, and I think this has a little bit to do with kind of the male brain and the female brain, because uh, you know, I think of these things in patterns. I would never use the word mathematical, uh, and so I want to, like, can you explain mathematical to to the layperson as it relates to emotion? And because I think that will really resonate with people who have problems connecting with the feeling of emotion, right? Because mathematics is more of a concrete concept.
Yeah, and I like to think of our brain and our mind as a computer. You know, we take things in through our five senses. We smell something, that chemical is transmitted into a digital message of ones and zeros, just like a computer. We hear something, that's translated in our nervous system again to a digital message from sound waves. And so everything we take in from our five senses comes in digitally and mathematically. And a circumstance will then imprint an emotion. If you think back to the thing that you think about the most with your parents, negative or positive experience, you might even think about it once a week as an adult, or sometimes every day if it's really traumatic. And that's reproducible, that same feeling, because it's got the same ratio of neurotransmitters. All these emotions, like I said, come from our limbic system and our brainstem, which is based on mathematics, which is the oldest language. Our verbal language came later in evolution.
Right.
So most mammals are, that are hanging out in nature that don't have anxiety. It's because they don't have a big cortex to get in the way. You don't see squirrels teasing each other like, oh, that squirrel's tail is not as fluffy as the other one. And they're worried about it, right? Because they don't have a big cortex, which is great for creation, but it's also horrible for chaos. So, and that chaos and fear leads to consumption. So bad mathematical programming, bad emotion systems puts you into this fear that's remembered, and the treatment for fear is consumption. All consumption leads to addiction. And so that's how I formulate the mathematical basis of emotion, which means it's fixable. It's produced by mathematics, it's fixable by mathematics. So
tell us a little bit about how you fix or teach people to fix this coping system.
Well, we talked about how there needs to be something that's not so time consuming from therapist to therapist for 5 hours. And what I've developed is a way to teach people to meditate in a guided meditation that leads them to produce a created emotion of the emotion that they want. So like I said, your emotion systems are your operating system. Unless you fix that, your anxiety and depression is going to pop up and pop up and pop up. You can try to fix it with medications and thinking, but if they come from corrupted emotion systems, you got to change it. And the only way to do that is to reprogram. What meditation does is decrease those five senses input. So then you can imprint the emotions in the data that you want. And so again, you fix emotion with emotion. Familiarity, it becomes familiar, not right or wrong. It's just what you want, and then repetition. And so that's how I do it, is through meditation. I also have nutrition and some yoga and breathing exercises, but the mainstay is meditation.
And is it your specific technique, or it's just when someone comes to you? And if it's your specific technique, how is it different than, there's lots of meditation gurus. So kind of explain why someone would come to you, and is it something that they learn or they receive in a session with you?
Yeah, it's something that I created over the last 10 years. Is I wanted to try to find the most efficient and strongest way to create emotion, because usually we're talking about emotion as a reaction. And even in psychotherapy, we're trying to manage those emotions. And that's trying to like herd cats, you know, you got emotions pop up here and there. And so I've been asking myself, well, how can you create emotion? And so I lead them on a guided meditation of what makes up your well-being. And that's your relationships, your physical and mental health, and then your passion in life. What you feel like makes you happy as a creator. And the reason that this works is because human beings are the only species that can create. People ask, why am I here? What's my destiny? Your destiny is to create. A dog, a monkey cannot take a stick and dirt and think, what would it be like to build the Empire State Building? They can't do that. Only humans can. That means creating is an answer. And when you create the emotions, then you create the mind that you want, and the thoughts come out of that. Because again, the thinking, the social, the language is all later in evolution. So the fix is what's earliest. And so I've created a way to quickly lead people and then to teach them how to do it on their own. I've even had people within days completely lose their anxiety and depression. I've had women after 20 years that were molested by 3 different men and 10 therapists and 4 doctors and 15 medications completely resolve their depression and anxiety, because emotion is powerful and strong. And so that's where I focus my, and actually I'm starting clinical research at a medical school here in Florida as a new psychotherapy because it's so powerful. And so hopefully I can prove that this works. And then it's literally pennies on the dollar and time that is just so much less than traditional cognitive behavior therapy, because you're using the power of emotion, of created emotion.
I'm excited about that. So where the research is at what university?
It's I haven't started it yet. It's going to be at University of Central Florida in Orlando. It's an MD medical school, and so I'm really excited about that because my goal is to, before I die, get this to children before age 7, so they don't have to go through the anxiety and depression. It is avoidable if they program themselves and just don't capture all this fear of separation. And really, it's our 3D world of survival that makes us feel separated and alone. But that's not the truth. We're connected to everything.
That's really exciting. You'll have to let me know about that research and those kinds of things. So at this point, you're working as an individual practitioner, or are you training coaches, therapists, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm just getting ready to launch a program online. And I'm working with a company now to help me organize it and launch it. But I'm open to coaching, and I can't say that I'm doing therapy because I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm an emergency physician.
Mhm.
So I'm coaching, but I'm launching a program now where I'm looking for just 10 to 15 people, and I will meet with them weekly. I will give them my program. And I hate to make claims, but everybody who's done my program, 100% it works if they do it. And the reason is it's based on the sound mathematical principles that you won't find anywhere else, because this guy just devoted 35 years of his life. He just died in 2017 with emotion systems. This is new information to psychology that nobody's using in psychotherapy. So I am going to invent a psychotherapy. I am going to teach psychiatrists and students about it. First, I've got to prove it in research. So right now, if anyone needs help with anxiety, depression, addiction, obesity, any mental suffering, I can help them. And I can teach others to do it as well.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of followers that are professionals. So, they might be reaching out trying to, we always want more tools in our toolbox and being able to train. So you are training professionals. You're able to train professionals.
I will be, and I'm open to share just to get this out there as much as I can before I die. That's my goal, and to do it in 5 different
Don, I think
languages.
you got some time.
Well, you never know. I was just diagnosed with colon cancer 5 months ago.
Oh, okay.
And at the same time, I was diagnosed with aortic aneurysm that needed replacement now and aortic valve. So I just went through chemo. You just never know. Chemo, radiation, just had open heart surgery. And now I have a new body. So again, facing death. I thought I was ready before,
Right.
but
You had to use
but
some of your techniques again to get through that.
yeah, I did my own program, and now um, colon cancer's gone, aneurysm's fixed, aortic valve's fixed. And but every day when we think we've conquered fear, you have to, when you wake up, program those emotions again. Because when you open your eyes, you're going to see fear, whether it's TV, your family, your spouse, work, whatever. This is a fear-induced world. And it's physical fear that's now taken to our emotions that causes separation anxiety. And so every day you've got to program your mind. And I've developed what I think is the most powerful way to do that through emotion.
Yeah, that's exciting. And we'll have all of your contact information in the description. But any last words about what you do, where you're trying to go with this? I'm super excited about research and training professionals. We need techniques that work, in 6 to 10 visits, and not 20 years of therapy.
Yeah, I think one thing I just want to say is that everybody deserves, and I hate to bring up death again, but before they die with a smile on their face. And so many people die in fear and loss. You've lost a lot. I've had a brother and sister die. We face loss and we face fear, but that doesn't have to be our destiny. We're born creators. Through fear, we become imitators, and then we consume. Look around the world. We're consuming things from the outside that we think are going to bring happiness, people's approval, their attention, their praise, things, money, and experiences. When consumption is not the answer, that is pleasure. And that always never lasts. What the answer is to become creator again. But you can't create in fear. So you got to lose the fear, create. And that's why my program is called Freedom from Fear, because once you lose fear, you become creator again. And that, like I said before, that's the human being destiny. And that's what makes lasting happiness. Creation comes from inside out when we're used to consuming from outside in. And that's where happiness is found.
Right. From the inside. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think this is going to be very beneficial to our viewers, and